In the summer of 1998, 4 cousins vanished from their grandmother's farmhouse in Weaver's Hollow, a quiet valley where time itself seemed to stand still. No signs of struggle, no footprints leading away. Just one window open, and a cassette tape playing on repeat in the empty living room. But 29 years later, when a drought drained the riverbed behind the old property, investigators found something that shouldn't have been there. Something that reopened the case the town swore it had buried. Tonight, we open that recording. What it captured and what it released will change how you think about missing person cases forever. Subscribe for more true crime investigations and psychological mysteries. Weaver's Hollow was a place that forgot how to breathe after sunset. The air grew heavy there, thick with cedar resin and damp earth. And even the crickets seemed cautious when the wind crawled through the trees. On a June night in 1994, the hollow was alive with distant thunder. Rain hadn't come yet, but the sky pulsed with a copper light that made the hills look like bruised skin. Inside the little farmhouse at the edge of the valley, 4 cousins were spending the first night of their summer break. Evelyn Kersey, known to everyone as Gran, had baked peach cobbler earlier that afternoon, the sweet smell still clinging to the walls. The cousins, Matthew 15, June 14, Caleb 12, and little Leah 8, had spent the day fishing in the creek behind the house. By dusk, their laughter had mixed with the croak of bullfrogs and the rustle of pine needles. At 9:47 p.m., a neighbor saw the farmhouse lights flicker 3 times, as if the power had stuttered. At 10:02, a call came into the county sheriff's office from Evelyn's number, static, then a woman's muffled voice. "Someone's at the—" The line cut out. When deputies arrived 40 minutes later, the front door hung open. Evelyn Kersey was found unconscious at the foot of the stairs with a severe concussion. The 4 children were gone. Their shoes remained neatly lined by the back door. Dinner dishes still waited in the sink. On the kitchen table lay a half-finished board game, the dice frozen mid-turn. And outside, under the flickering porch light, a trail of muddy footprints led away from the house and stopped after 20 feet, swallowed by the rain-soaked earth. The search lasted 6 weeks. Hundreds of volunteers combed the woods, divers scoured Weaver's Creek, and helicopters swept the hollow until fuel budgets ran dry. Nothing. Not a scrap of clothing, not a bone, not a single verifiable lead. By autumn, the case file was closed under presumed abduction, unresolved. Gran Evelyn died 2 years later in a nursing home, still calling the children's names. The hollow went quiet after that. The Kersey farmhouse decayed into a shell of warped boards and creeping ivy. People said it was cursed ground. Others said it was simply forgotten. Then, in August 2023, a record drought hit West Virginia. Weaver's Creek receded to a trickle, exposing black mud and decades of discarded debris. A local farmer walking his dog noticed something protruding from the bank. A small wooden box, wedged in the silt like a coffin. Inside was a water-stained notebook wrapped in oilcloth. The first page bore 4 names, written in faded blue ink: Matthew June, Caleb, Leah. And below them, in trembling handwriting, "We're still here." Deputy Claire Donnelly was 33 when the call came through. The farmer's find had been passed along the chain until it reached her desk at the Greene County Sheriff's Office. A cold case folder she knew by heart. Her father, the late Sheriff Donnelly, had led the original 1994 investigation. She still remembered being 3 years old, sitting on his lap as he stared at those missing person photos pinned above his desk, whispering the names like a prayer. By the time Claire drove out to the hollow the next morning, mist rolled low along the road like spilled milk. The Kersey property was barely recognizable. A field of weeds, the house's skeletal frame leaning toward collapse. The smell of wet rot clung to everything. Two forensic techs in Tyvek suits waited by the creek. They'd already sealed the wooden box inside evidence plastic, its contents catalogued and drying in the trunk of Claire's cruiser. But the discovery had stirred up more than mud. Local reporters had caught wind of it within hours. Drones buzzed overhead. "Any chance it's a hoax?" one tech asked. "Maybe," Claire said, kneeling by the exposed bank. "But the papers from the 90s, ink degradations consistent with age." She traced her gloved finger along a faint depression in the mud, the outline of what might once have been a shoe print. Small, child-sized. The tech swallowed. "You think this is where they—" Claire didn't answer. She stood and scanned the tree line. Weaver's Hollow stretched before her in muted greens and browns, beautiful in a way that hurt to look at, because beauty had never saved anyone here. As she turned back toward her car, a breeze rustled through the pines, carrying with it a sound so soft she almost missed it. 4 voices overlapping in childish harmony, like laughter buried under leaves. She froze, heart hammering, then shook it off. Probably wind, probably memory. But when she reached the cruiser, she noticed something else. On the inside of the rear window, where condensation had formed during the drive, a child's handprint had appeared, faint and perfect, pressed into the glass from the inside. Claire stared at it for a long time before wiping it away with her sleeve. Then she looked toward the hollow again and whispered, as if to the trees, "All right, kids, let's bring you home." The investigation was open again, and Weaver's Hollow, after 29 years of silence, began to breathe once more. Morning light crept through the fog like a slow exhale, revealing Weaver's Hollow in muted grays and greens. Deputy Claire Donnelly parked her cruiser at the edge of the overgrown driveway and stepped out, gravel crunching under her boots. The air smelled of moss and rust. Somewhere beyond the tree line, Weaver's Creek whispered as it wound through the valley, the same creek that had carried the wooden box into view. She stood still for a moment, taking in the Kersey farmhouse. It leaned slightly to the right, its porch half collapsed, windows like blackened eyes. The front steps had surrendered to time, swallowed by ferns and mud. The forensics team had already marked their perimeter with yellow tape, but there wasn't much left to preserve. Time had done its own erasing. Claire ducked under the tape and made her way inside. The floor groaned under her weight, the smell of wet wood thick in the air. Dust motes swirled in the sunlight spilling through the holes in the roof. In the living room, a broken rocking chair sat beside a cold hearth. The wallpaper, once floral, had faded to the color of ash. And yet, amid all the decay, there were still traces of a life. A child's marble glimmered under a collapsed shelf. A spoon, tarnished but intact, rested beside the fireplace. Claire crouched to pick up the marble. It was blue, streaked with white, like the sky before a storm. She rolled it between her fingers, thinking of the photographs. 4 smiling cousins on a summer afternoon, their faces lit by sun and trust. The sound of boots crunching behind her broke the reverie. "Deputy Donnelly," said Detective Harris, her supervisor, a tall man with salt and pepper hair and a voice worn by too many years of unanswered questions. "You're early." "Couldn't sleep," Claire said, pocketing the marble. He nodded toward the evidence bag in her hand. "That the notebook?" She held it up. Inside the clear plastic was a small, water-warped journal with a green canvas cover. The ink had bled in places, but the writing, tight, uneven cursive, was still visible. "We've got the first page," she said. "The names. And that line. We're still here. Forensics says the handwriting's juvenile. Could be June or Matthew. Could also be someone's idea of a cruel joke," Harris muttered. Claire gave him a sharp look. "It was found sealed in oilcloth, buried in creek mud older than I am. Whoever planted it would have needed to know this drought was coming." "Still," he said, rubbing his jaw. Let's not jump ahead. We'll send it to Charleston for ink dating. See if it lines up with the original disappearance window. Claire nodded, but her mind was already racing ahead. At the sheriff's office, the notebook sat under a magnifying lamp in the evidence room. Claire stood beside a lab technician named Jules, who adjusted the focus carefully. Paper's composition matches mid-90s stationery stock, Jules said. Blue ballpoint ink, standard roller tip. And look here, she pointed with tweezers. Tiny crescent indentations between some words, like whoever wrote it pressed hard enough to leave nail marks. Claire frowned. Fear or urgency? Jules flipped the page carefully. The next page was mostly illegible, the ink having dissolved into swirls of blue and brown. But a few words stood out. He watches from the trees. Don't go near the cellar. If we hear the bell, we hide. Claire's stomach tightened. Bell. Jules zoomed in on the letters. That's what it says. There had been a bell at the Kersey farmhouse, a small brass one that hung on the porch, used to call the kids in for supper. It had vanished after the disappearances. Claire remembered reading that detail in her father's notes. He'd mentioned it twice, underlined both times. Bell missing from scene. Her father had never believed it was an abduction by outsiders. He'd always suspected something or someone local. By late afternoon, the small-town press had descended on Greene County. A white van from Channel 8 News idled in the lot as reporters waited for a statement. Inside the station, Sheriff McAdams leaned over Claire's desk. "Media's hungry," he said. "We're not giving them much." "I'll handle it," Claire replied, eyes still on the open file. The 1994 photos stared back at her, 4 school portraits pinned to the case summary. Matthew Kersey, dark-haired, athletic, protective. June, shy, bookish, braces. Caleb, mischievous grin, chipped tooth. Leah, the youngest, curls like spun gold. "Sometimes," McAdams said softly, "you reopen a door and forget what's waiting behind it." Claire looked up. We already opened it when that notebook surfaced. That evening, she drove home through the mountains, headlights slicing through mist. The radio played softly, an old country song about coming home, but her mind was miles away, trapped in the hollow. At home, she spread her father's old case files across her kitchen table. The paper smelled faintly of tobacco and cedar. Handwritten notes filled the margins. Observations, regrets, fragments of doubt. July 2nd, 1994. Power flicker unexplained. No storms in the area until 10:30 p.m. July 5th. Footprints vanish abruptly. Mud too shallow for full prints. Possible boards beneath surface. August 9th. Local hunter reports hearing children singing near hollow. Dismissed as rumor. Claire exhaled. Her father had believed something about the terrain itself was wrong. Sinkholes, hidden tunnels, the remnants of old mines. The Kersey property sat on what used to be the Weaver salt mine, sealed off since 1948 after a cave-in killed 7 workers. She picked up the phone and called the county records office. "This is Deputy Donnelly. I need access to the old Weaver mine maps. Yes, everything before 1950. Tonight, if possible." 2 hours later, she was back in the hollow, parked by the creek. The night air was colder now, carrying the smell of damp earth. She spread the yellowed maps across her hood under flashlight. The lines were faint but visible. Tunnels running beneath the Kersey property, some collapsing, others unmarked. The main shaft passed less than 30 yards from where the farmhouse once stood. Claire folded the map and looked toward the ruins. The moon had risen above the ridge, its light silvering the broken beams. Something about the stillness made her uneasy. She turned back toward her cruiser and froze. Across the creek, near the tree line, a figure stood watching her. It was small, pale, unmoving, child-sized. Her hand went instinctively to her holster. "Hello?" No response. The figure didn't move, didn't flinch. Then, as the fog thickened, It seemed to dissolve, fading back into the dark like mist swallowed by itself. Claire's breath came fast. She swung her flashlight toward the spot. Nothing. Just weeds and trees. Probably a trick of the light. Or fatigue. But when she turned back to the car, the passenger side door was open. She was certain she had locked it. On the front seat lay the marble she'd pocketed earlier, glinting in the flashlight beam. It had rolled to the middle of the seat, and beside it, written in condensation on the windshield, were 2 words: "Don't dig." The next morning, the hollow buzzed with activity. Search teams, drones, forensic tents. Claire briefed them all, her voice steady, though her hands trembled slightly around the clipboard. They were to excavate near the old well, 30 yards from the creek. Ground-penetrating radar had detected anomalies, cavities that could be air pockets or collapsed tunnels. As the machinery rumbled to life, a reporter from Channel 8 shouted from behind the tape, "Deputy Donnelly, do you believe the children are buried here?" Claire didn't answer, because belief wasn't the right word. In Weaver's Hollow, belief had nothing to do with it. By dawn the next day, Weaver's Hollow was alive with the low growl of engines. 2 white tents glimmered in the fog like ghosts of canvas. The air smelled of diesel, wet clay, and anticipation. Deputy Claire Donnelly stood beside a backhoe operator as he eased the machine into position near the well pit. The ground here had sunk slightly, forming a shallow depression ringed with cattails. A faint shimmer of water pooled in its center. "Scan picked up 2 voids below," said Jules, the forensic tech, holding the ground-penetrating radar tablet. "One's about 3 feet down, the other maybe 7. Could be a collapsed tunnel pocket or a burial shaft." Claire said quietly. Detective Harris joined her, coffee in hand, eyes squinting against the mist. "Let's not start that rumor until we've got bones, Donnelly." Half the county's already spinning ghost stories. Claire didn't reply. She watched the machine's steel bucket bite into the earth, peeling away layers of mud. The sound echoed off the hills, a rhythmic metallic heartbeat. By mid-morning, a small crowd of locals had gathered along the perimeter tape. Some wore work boots and curiosity. Others carried old grief like armor. Among them stood a frail woman in a green raincoat clutching a Bible. "That's Alma Vick," Harris murmured. "She used to babysit the Kersey kids back in the 90s. Alma's lips moved as she whispered a prayer, eyes fixed on the dig. Claire remembered the woman's statement from the original file. Heard a bell at 10:30, thought it was the wind. The bell again. Always the bell. Jules signaled from the pit. "We've got something." Workers paused. Claire descended the slope carefully, boots sinking in mud. A square of discolored soil had appeared, darker, compacted differently than the rest. She crouched, brushing away clumps with gloved fingers. Beneath the surface lay a wooden plank, weather-rotted and slick. It smelled faintly of iron and mold. "Old timber from the mine, maybe," Harris said. "Maybe," Claire echoed, but her pulse quickened. "Get a core sample." They drilled carefully, extracting a cylinder of soil from beneath the plank. At 6 inches deep, the auger hit something brittle that gave with a soft snap. Jules' breath caught. "Bone fragment," she whispered. The excavation froze. Cameras clicked. The crowd murmured. Claire stood slowly. "Seal the area. Nobody touches that layer until the coroner's team arrives." Rain returned by noon, a thin, needling drizzle that turned the soil to sludge. Claire took shelter under the equipment tent with Harris, watching the dig site darken. "Could be animal remains," he said, though his tone lacked conviction. "Or human," she replied. "Either way, they were buried deliberately. That plank's not natural." Harris rubbed his temples. "We'll know soon. In the meantime, I want you off the scene for an hour. Get food, clear your head." Claire managed a half smile. "You pulling rank?" "Call it concern." She nodded reluctantly and started toward her cruiser. The drizzle had thickened to rain, soft and persistent. As she reached the car, she caught sight of a man standing near the tree line, tall, raincoat hood drawn low. He wasn't with the press or the search crews. When she looked again, he was gone. At the diner in nearby Mill Creek, the television above the counter replayed the news segment. Possible human remains discovered in Weaver's Hollow. Site of 1994 disappearance. The caption crawled beneath images of the old farmhouse. The waitress, a woman in her 50s, poured Claire more coffee. "You're one of the deputies working that case, right?" Claire nodded. "My sister went to school with June Kersey," the woman said softly. "Smart girl. Played piano at church. They said she had dreams. Same one over and over. Woke up crying, said the woods were calling her name." Claire's hand paused on the mug. "She ever tell anyone what she thought it meant?" "Only that the voice in the woods sounded like family." The waitress moved away, leaving Claire staring at the black surface of her coffee. Raindrops beat against the window, each one a tiny metronome counting years lost. Back at the site, floodlights bathed the pit in harsh white. The coroner's team had uncovered a shallow wooden frame about 4 feet long, child-sized. Inside lay fragments, a partial rib cage, several finger bones, scraps of faded fabric clinging to the soil. Claire's stomach turned. She forced herself closer. The fabric was blue and white check, pattern still visible under the mud. "Leah's dress," Harris whispered beside her. "Same as the one from the photo." Claire nodded numbly. The air around them seemed to tighten. Jules crouched over the find. "There's more below. See this indentation? Could be another cavity." The backhoe couldn't go deeper without risk of collapse, so they worked by hand, trowel by trowel. Each scoop released the smell of old water and decay. Another piece surfaced. A small brass object, tarnished but recognizable. The bell. Claire reached for it carefully. The handle was snapped, edges green with corrosion. Inside, something rattled faintly. She turned it over, and a small bead rolled into her palm. A glass marble, blue streaked with white. Her breath caught. Harris looked at her. "Same as the one you found yesterday." Claire closed her hand around the marble. The bell felt unnervingly warm against her skin. A sudden tremor passed through the ground. A deep, hollow vibration, like the earth exhaling. Tools rattled. Mud slid from the pit wall. "Everyone out," Harris shouted. Workers scrambled up the slope as the soil gave way. A section of ground collapsed, revealing a dark opening beneath, the entrance to an old tunnel. The rain hissed louder, filling the hollow with steam. Claire peered into the void. Cold air breathed up from below, smelling of salt and something ancient. She switched on her flashlight. The beam pierced only a few feet of blackness before dissolving. "Mine shaft," Jules said shakily. "Looks unstable." Claire felt a strange pull, a compulsion to look deeper. Just visible at the edge of the light was a shape. Curved, pale, maybe stone, maybe bone. "Seal it," Harris ordered. "We'll bring in structural engineers tomorrow." But as they backed away, a faint metallic sound drifted up from the tunnel. Ding, ding. The bell tone, soft, distant, deliberate. The crew froze. Even the rain seemed to hold its breath. Claire's flashlight flickered, then steadied. "Did anyone?" Harris shook his head, face pale. "Get everyone out." Now that night, back in her apartment, Claire sat wrapped in a blanket, the brass bell on the table before her. She'd kept it, against protocol maybe, but she couldn't leave it behind. The marble beside it caught the lamplight, casting ripples of blue across her wall. She opened her laptop and typed the day's report. Partial human remains recovered, consistent with child female, approximately 8 years. Tunnel discovered beneath excavation site. Further investigation pending structural clearance. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. She added, almost against her will. Audible chime detected post-collapse, source undetermined. She closed the file. Silence filled the room. From somewhere outside, perhaps a passing car, perhaps the wind, came a faint echo. One single chime of metal against metal. She stared at the bell. It was perfectly still. At sunrise, the hollow steamed under thin fog. Reporters were kept 100 yards back while engineers set up scanners. Claire stood with Harris on the ridge overlooking the pit. "They'll start reinforcing the shaft by noon," he said. "Then we go down." Claire didn't answer. She was watching the mist gather where the tunnel mouth gaped open. It reminded her of breath on glass, alive, shifting. "You believe in omens, Donley?" Harris asked quietly. "I believe in evidence," she said. He smiled faintly. "Then let's hope evidence believes in us." Below, the wind moved through the hollow, carrying a faint metallic note that could have been machinery, or something older remembering its song. The next morning broke cold and colorless. The rain had stopped, but the sky still hung low, a ceiling of gray wool pressing against the valley. Floodlights glared over Weaver's Hollow as a new convoy of vehicles arrived. Engineers, forensic divers, county officials. The site that once held only memories was now a grid of measured lines and fluorescent tape. Deputy Claire Donnelly climbed out of her cruiser, thermos in hand. She hadn't slept more than an hour. The faint metallic chime that had haunted her apartment window through the night still lingered in her ears, refusing to fade even with daylight. Detective Harris was already waiting by the pit, clipboard under one arm. "Morning. We've got partial stabilization on the upper section," he said. "The shaft's about 20 feet deep before it opens into a horizontal drift. Probably part of the old Weaver mine network from the 1890s. "Any risk of collapse?" Claire asked, squinting into the dark mouth below. "Always a risk," said one of the engineers, tightening his helmet strap. "But we've reinforced the walls with steel mesh. You'll have 15 minutes max inside before we call you back up." Claire nodded. "Let's do it." She suited up. Helmet, light, respirator, harness. The air smelled of wet iron and soil. Harris adjusted the safety line attached to her belt. "Keep the radio on at all times." "No heroics," he said. She managed a faint smile. "You've known me long enough to know that's not a promise I can make." The descent was slow, each rung slick with condensation. The beam of her headlamp cut through mist, revealing glistening walls streaked with ochre. Water dripped steadily from the ceiling, echoing like a metronome. Halfway down, the smell changed. Earth gave way to something mineral and sharp, like rusted coins. She felt her pulse in her ears. At the base of the shaft, her boots sank into ankle-deep mud. The tunnel ahead stretched into blackness, timbers leaning like the ribs of some buried animal. "Base to Donnelly." Harris's voice crackled through the headset. "You're clear to proceed 10 meters. Report anything unusual." "Copy that." She moved forward slowly, her light sweeping across collapsed boards and puddles of stagnant water. A rat scurried past, vanishing into a hole in the wall. The deeper she went, the colder it became. The air was still, but the silence had a pulse. She could hear faint creaks, whispers of shifting soil. 5 meters in, her beam caught something ahead, a shape protruding from the wall, half buried in clay. She crouched and brushed away the dirt. It was a wooden beam, carved crudely with initials. J.K. Her stomach tightened. June Kersey. "Base, I found something," she said. "Carved beam. Possible initials from one of the missing." "Copy that. Mark the location and keep moving. You've got 9 minutes." She clipped a small flag marker to the timber and continued. The tunnel curved slightly to the left. Ahead, the floor dropped into a narrow chamber, the ceiling lower, walls closer. The beam of her light landed on something pale. For a moment she thought it was a trick of moisture, but then she saw the outline clearly. A small, skeletal hand pressed palm out against the wall, as if frozen mid-reach. She swallowed hard, forcing herself closer. The bones were coated in mineral deposits, glistening faintly. Around the wrist clung tatters of fabric, blue and white check, like the dress from the pit above. "Base, I've got skeletal remains, possibly the same child," she said, voice steady though her chest felt hollow. "Copy, Donnelly. Hold position, we're sending the coroner down." But before she could acknowledge, a soft sound broke through the radio static. A faint ding. Ding. She froze. "Harris?" "Say again?" No reply. Only the bell. It wasn't coming from the headset this time. It was deeper, somewhere ahead in the dark. Her headlamp flickered once, twice, then steadied. She aimed it forward. The tunnel continued, narrowing, ending in what looked like a collapsed door frame. Hanging from one of the splintered beams was a rusted brass bell, its clapper swaying slightly, though no wind touched it. She took a slow step forward. The bell chimed again, low and deliberate. And then something shifted beneath her boot. A hollow thunk. She froze. The ground gave way. For a heartbeat, she was falling through black air, the radio bursting into static, mud and stone tumbling around her. She hit something soft but unyielding, a bed of wet silt, and the world blinked out for a second. When she came to, everything was silent. Her lamp flickered weakly, casting thin arcs across the walls. She was lying in what appeared to be an underground chamber, square, maybe 10 feet across, shored up with ancient beams. Her radio hissed faintly. "Nellie, Claire, respond!" She coughed. I'm here. Minor fall, maybe 10 feet. I'm in some kind of lower chamber. Don't move. We're rigging a line to pull you out." "Understood," she said, though her eyes were already drawn to something across the room. A wooden crate, half buried in mud. The lid had split, revealing bundles wrapped in oilcloth. She crawled closer, ignoring the ache in her ribs. Inside the cloth were objects: children's shoes, a rusted hairpin, a broken toy truck, and a stack of Polaroid photos sealed in plastic. She pulled one free, wiping mud from the surface. The photo showed 4 children, 2 girls, 2 boys, standing in front of a farmhouse porch. The Kersey cousins. Behind them, half in shadow, was a man's figure, tall, face obscured by glare. Claire's throat tightened. She flipped to another photo. This one was closer, the same children sitting on a blanket near a creek. Their expressions were uncertain, watchful. A third photo, taken inside a dim barn. The children again, but the smallest, Leah, was crying. Behind her, a man's hand rested on her shoulder. The photos stuck together at the edges. When she peeled the last one free, her stomach turned cold. It showed the same scene, but this time the man's face was visible. It was her father. The radio crackled again, faintly distorted. "Claire, we've got a line ready. Do you see the harness light?" She stared at the photo, her mind roaring. Her father had died when she was 16. Heart attack, they said. He'd been a sheriff's deputy then, part of the original search. She forced her voice steady. "I see it," pulling the line now. As the harness descended, she tucked the Polaroids into her pocket. The bell above chimed faintly, once, as if acknowledging her. When she surfaced minutes later, Harris grabbed her arm, eyes wide. "You okay?" "You went off the grid for 3 minutes. Thought we lost you. I'm fine," she lied, brushing mud from her helmet. "The chamber below contains evidence, artifacts, possibly belongings of the victims." He nodded to the techs. "Seal it off. We'll extract them under controlled conditions." As the engineers packed up, Claire walked toward her cruiser, heart pounding. She could feel the Polaroids pressing against her chest pocket, burning like a confession. She didn't tell Harris what she'd found. Not yet. That night, alone in her apartment again, she spread the photos across her kitchen table. The light from the lamp trembled slightly, as though reacting to what it saw. Her father's face in the image was unmistakable. Same jawline, same sheriff's uniform patch. He was younger, but it was him. The handwriting on the back of one photo read, Weaver's Hollow, July 12, 1994. 2 weeks before the children vanished. Her hands shook. She whispered to the empty room, "What did you do, Dad?" No answer came. Only the faint metallic ring from somewhere distant, almost like laughter hidden in the wind. By midnight, she had locked the photos in a desk drawer, but sleep refused to come. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the hand on the child's shoulder, the glint of a badge in dim light. At 2:17 a.m., her phone buzzed. An unknown number. She answered. A man's voice, low and gravelly. "You should have left it buried." Then the line went dead. The next morning arrived gray and tense, as if the sky itself knew something had shifted in Weaver's Hollow. The excavation site had been roped off and guarded overnight, but Claire barely noticed the activity when she arrived. Her mind kept circling back to the photographs hidden in her apartment drawer. Detective Harris was waiting beside a stack of evidence crates, his face drawn. "Morning. We pulled more items from that lower chamber. Toys, bones, cloth fibers. Some matched to Leah Kersey's dental chart. Coroner's confident enough to call her confirmed Claire's throat tightened. And the others? Still waiting. Could take weeks." He handed her a clipboard. "But there's something else. One of the photos we found sealed in a jar shows a group of adults. The sheriff's department from 1994, including your father." Her pulse skipped. He was on the original search team. "Yeah," Harris said, studying her. "You okay with that?" She nodded too quickly. "Of course. It's just strange to see his face turning up in evidence after all this time." He exhaled. "We'll pull the archives this afternoon. Maybe your dad left something that makes sense of this mess." Claire forced a smile. "Let's hope so." But deep inside, she already knew there was nothing about this that would make sense. The county records building hadn't changed much since her academy days. A gray slab of stone with flickering lights and the faint smell of dust and toner. Inside, an elderly clerk named Marlene led her down a hall lined with beige file cabinets. The 1994 investigation was logged under case number 421-8A. Marlene said, "That's the Kersey children disappearance, right?" "Yes," Claire replied. Marlene paused before unlocking the cabinet. "Your father was part of that, wasn't he?" Deputy Donnelly. "Good man." Claire's jaw clenched. "Yes, ma'am." "Good man." The file drawer slid open with a metallic groan. Claire sifted through stacks of yellowed folders until she found the one marked Kersey, 1994. It was heavier than she expected, the paper swollen from age. Inside were dozens of reports, search maps, interviews, timelines. She recognized her father's handwriting on the margins, neat and firm. Notes about tire tracks, timelines, inconsistencies. He'd been thorough, but tucked in the back was something she didn't recognize. A sealed envelope, unmarked except for the faint initials RD, Robert Donnelly. Her father's name. She hesitated, then broke the seal. Inside was a single Polaroid. Her stomach dropped. It was identical to one she'd found in the tunnel, the children by the creek. But this version had something scrawled across the bottom in shaky handwriting. "They followed me here." Her hands trembled. Beneath the photo lay a single sheet of lined paper, folded twice. "If you're reading this, you found what we couldn't bury. The hollow isn't just land. It remembers. I thought I could contain it. I was wrong. R.R. D." Claire stared at the words until they blurred. Contain what? The room suddenly felt smaller. The air smelled faintly metallic, like rain before a storm. She folded the note back into the envelope and slipped it into her jacket pocket just as Harris entered the records room. "Find anything?" he asked. "Just the usual field notes," she said quickly, closing the folder. "Nothing we didn't already know." He nodded, distracted. "We've got a meeting with the state forensics team at 4. They're bringing psych profiling for whoever did this. You'll want to see it." "Right," she said, forcing her voice steady. But as he turned away, she pressed her hand against the pocket containing her father's message. It felt like a heartbeat. That evening, the evidence lab hummed with low fluorescent light. Harris stood beside the whiteboard while Dr. Yara Finch, a forensic psychologist from the State Bureau, clicked through slides of photos and behavioral charts. "The placement of the remains suggests ritual repetition," Finch said. "The objects, marbles, bells, children's items, aren't random. They represent control. The offender revisited the site, possibly multiple times. Could he have been part of law enforcement?" Harris asked. Finch nodded. "Possible. The concealment is skilled. And the placement of decoy evidence, like the beam carvings, suggests insider knowledge." Claire's chest tightened, meaning someone on the original team could have been involved. "It's a statistical possibility," Finch said gently. "Offenders sometimes insert themselves into investigations, especially those craving proximity to the event." Claire looked down at her notepad, pretending to take notes. Her fingers were trembling. Finch continued. "There's also a psychological signature, guilt. Whoever buried those children didn't just hide them. They tended to the site, returned, maybe even tried to preserve it." Claire's voice came out quieter than she intended. "Like trying to make amends." Finch glanced at her, surprised. "Exactly." Harris folded his arms. "If the killer was part of the department, we'll find a link. Old rosters, duty logs, anything." The meeting adjourned with the rustle of papers and the hum of fluorescent lights. Claire stayed seated long after everyone had left. When she finally stood, she noticed something on the table, a bell. It was inside an evidence bag, tagged from the site. The same corroded brass, the same faint crack in its handle. Her reflection shimmered in the plastic. For a second, she could swear it pulsed. Driving home through the dark hills, Claire felt the weight of the envelope against her ribs. The wipers beat rhythmically across the windshield, but the night beyond remained impenetrable. When she pulled into her driveway, a flicker of movement caught her eye. Someone standing near the oak tree by her porch. She killed the engine and stepped out. "Hello?" The figure didn't move. Just a shadow against the darker shadow of the trees. She drew her flashlight. The beam cut across an empty yard. No one there. Only a faint sound drifting through the stillness. A single chime. Inside her house, she locked the door and sat at the kitchen table, spreading the Polaroids again. Her father's face stared up from the images. She replayed memories she hadn't touched in years. Late nights waiting for him to come home from patrol. The smell of leather and rain when he hugged her. The time she overheard him crying in the garage after a case went bad. He'd been a good man. Everyone said so. But the photos told a different story, one he had buried deep. She retrieved the note again, reading the line that had lodged in her mind. "The hollow isn't just land. It remembers." What did he mean by that? A thunderstorm rolled in from the west, low rumble shaking the window panes. Lightning flashed, and for a split second, the reflection in the glass wasn't her own. It was her father, standing behind her, expression unreadable. She spun around. The room was empty. By morning, the storm had passed. Claire drove to the old Donnelly farmhouse, her childhood home, now rented to strangers. She parked on the gravel drive, staring at the porch where she used to sit with her father on summer nights. Through the rain-streaked window, she could see the barn behind the house, its door slightly ajar. Something pulled her toward it. Inside, Dust motes danced in slanted light. The smell of hay and oil brought a wave of disorientation. She found the old workbench, drawers still intact. In the bottom one, wrapped in waxed paper, was a metal badge, her father's, and beneath it, a single cassette tape labeled July 14th, 1994, Field Audio. Her fingers shook as she slipped it into her old tape recorder, miraculously still working after all these years. Static hissed. Then her father's voice. Search day 4. Found tracks leading west of Weaver's Hollow. Kids might have gone down near the shaft. Locals won't go near it. Says the ground's wrong there. Says it hums at night. A pause. Then quieter. Something's watching us. I can feel it. The kids didn't just vanish. They were taken. Not by a man. Not entirely. Another burst of static. Then his voice again, strained, almost pleading. If anyone finds this, tell Claire I'm sorry. I thought I could seal it. I thought the hollow would forgive me. The tape ended with a faint metallic chime. Claire sat frozen, the recorder still hissing softly. Rain began again, light and steady, tapping against the barn roof like fingers. For the first time, she felt something colder than fear. Recognition. Whatever her father had uncovered in 1994 hadn't died with him. It was still alive, still waiting beneath the hollow. And now, it had her attention. By dawn, the storm had rinsed Weaver's Hollow clean, leaving the valley veiled in silver mist. The rain had washed the excavation mud into soft folds that looked almost peaceful, as though the ground were pretending to rest. Claire Donnelly parked her cruiser beside the security trailer and stepped out, boots sinking into the wet clay. She hadn't told anyone about the tape. Not Harris, not the state team. The words "I thought I could seal it" kept looping through her head like a song she couldn't shut off. At the site, technicians were disassembling the scaffolds. The tunnel had been sealed overnight after a micro-collapse, the engineers citing gas pocket instability. Claire flashed her badge and ducked under the tape anyway. "Ma'am, we're not cleared for re-entry," one of the foremen called. "I'm just checking perimeter integrity," she lied, moving toward the pit. Her breath steamed in the chill air. She crouched near the edge and pressed the recorder's play button. Her father's voice filled the fog again, quieter now, like it belonged to the mist. Kids might have gone down near the shaft. Locals won't go near it. The ground's wrong there. She scanned the slope, eyes tracing the line where rainwater trickled toward the sealed tunnel. The same ground, the same wrongness. Something caught her eye, a thin metallic wire half buried in the mud, leading away from the pit toward the woods. She tugged gently. It came free with a clump of earth, revealing a rusted tag at the end. Property of Weaver Mining Company, 1893. She pocketed it, heart thudding. Her father's notes had mentioned the mine's west entrance, closed decades before the disappearances. Maybe he'd gone there that day. Maybe the tape was his breadcrumb. The path into the woods was barely visible now, swallowed by brush. Water dripped from cedar boughs in slow rhythm, matching the faint ticking of her father's recorder in her pocket. She walked until the forest thickened, the air damp and mineral sweet. An hour in, she reached a clearing. Half-collapsed timbers jutted from the hillside, an old mine-access door chained shut. The sign above it, barely legible beneath moss, read, Weaver West number. 2 entrance, keep out. Claire's flashlight beam slid across the rusted chain. The padlock hung open. Someone had already been here. She hesitated, glancing back at the silent forest. Only rain-soft wind answered. She ducked inside. The tunnel sloped downward, narrower than the one at the dig. Her lamp illuminated wooden supports blackened with age, initials carved into them, miners' marks long forgotten. 10 yards in, the air changed. Cooler, denser. She heard the faintest hum, so low she felt it more than heard it, vibrating through her boots. The hum deepened as she advanced, until she reached a small chamber where water pooled ankle-deep. In the center stood a rusted iron cart tipped on its side. Something white protruded from beneath it. She knelt, brushing mud away. Bone again. Human. Adult, this time. Her stomach twisted. She leaned closer. The skull was fractured, and clinging to what remained of the jaw was a sheriff's badge, corroded but still legible. R. Donnelly, deputy. Her father. Claire staggered back, breath punching out of her chest. No, they said heart failure, she whispered. They said... The tape recorder in her pocket clicked and began to play on its own. Claire, if you find this... She froze. The voice wasn't from the speaker. It came from the darkness ahead. Her headlamp caught movement. A figure half seen beyond the puddled water, dressed in a deputy's uniform gone gray with age. Dad? She breathed. The figure didn't move, didn't blink. Its badge glimmered faintly in her light, identical to the one lying in the mud. Then the lamp flickered, and he was gone. She bolted from the shaft, slipping on wet rock, scraping her hands on the walls. When daylight finally hit her face, she collapsed to her knees, gasping. The rational part of her brain fought to explain it. Exhaustion, carbon buildup, shock. But the hum still vibrated faintly in her bones, a low resonance that didn't belong to wind or earth. She sat there for several minutes until she could breathe evenly again. Then she called Harris. He met her an hour later at the site office, hair still damp from the morning rain. You look like hell, he said quietly. Where were you? Following up on my father's notes, she said. The west entrance. His eyes narrowed. Claire, that shaft's been condemned for 40 years. I know what I saw, she said, voice trembling but firm. A body, his body, badge still pinned to the uniform. Harris stared at her, disbelief giving way to concern. We found your father's remains 16 years ago, Claire. Buried in St. Agnes Cemetery. You were at the funeral? She shook her head. Then who's buried there? Silence filled the office. The hum of the fluorescent lights seemed suddenly too loud. I'll send a team, Harris said finally. We'll verify everything. But you... He paused, lowering his voice. You need rest. You're crossing lines here. I don't have time to rest. He sighed. Then at least don't go back there alone. That night, she drove to the cemetery. The caretaker's cottage was dark, the gate unlatched. Rain misted the gravestones, turning names into smudges of gray. Row D, Plot 16. Robert Donnelly, 1961 to 2006. The ground looked undisturbed, but when her flashlight swept across the headstone, she noticed something new, a fresh bouquet of lilies. Still wet, their stems wrapped in a red ribbon. Someone else had been here recently. A folded note rested beneath the flowers. She hesitated, then unfolded it. He didn't die there. We moved him. For your sake, stop digging before the hollow finishes what it started. No signature. Her pulse hammered in her throat. She turned toward the road and froze. A dark sedan idled near the gate, engine running, headlights off. She couldn't see the driver, only the faint red glow of a cigarette ember. When she raised her flashlight, the car rolled backward into the fog and vanished. By morning, she hadn't slept. She sat in her living room surrounded by maps, photographs, and the recorder, piecing together timelines. The Kersey children vanished July 26th, 1994. Her father's tape was dated July 14th, 12 days apart. If he'd found something in the hollow, maybe the children stumbled onto the same thing later. Something old, something he thought he could seal. Her phone buzzed. A message from Harris. Got your father's autopsy exhumation approved. Tomorrow, 8 a.m. County Morgue. She stared at the text until her vision blurred. The world around her felt fragile, like glass about to crack. Then the phone buzzed again, same number as the night before. "You're being watched. Stop," she typed back, hands shaking. "Who is this?" No reply. Only a faint sound from the phone speaker. Ding! Ding! The bell. The next day, the morgue smelled of disinfectant and cold metal. The coroner, Dr. Lopez, met them in the autopsy suite. "Are you sure about this?" Lopez asked. "It's been almost 20 years. "Positive," Harris said. Claire stood motionless as the coffin was opened. Inside lay a skeleton in a sheriff's uniform, badge gleaming faintly. Lopez examined the jawbone, then frowned. "This dental pattern doesn't match Deputy Donnelly's records." Claire's heart stuttered. "Whoever this is," Lopez continued, "he's not your father." Harris turned to her slowly. "Then where is he?" Before she could answer, her phone vibrated again. A single new message. "Look under the house." Her breath caught. The farmhouse. The one she'd grown up in. That evening, she drove back out to the Donnelly property. The renters were gone, evacuated during the storm warnings. The house stood silent, windows reflecting the bruised sky. She circled to the crawlspace hatch at the rear foundation. Mud slicked her hands as she pried it open. A gust of air rolled out, damp, cold, smelling of old wood and copper. She aimed her flashlight inside. Dust swirled in the beam. Rats scurried away. Then the light hit something that made her freeze. A wooden box. She crawled toward it, scraping her shoulders on the beams. The box was heavy, sealed with a rusted latch. She flipped it open. Inside were children's toys. 4 of them. A doll, a truck, a marble bag, and a bell. Beneath them lay a piece of paper folded into a triangle. Her father's handwriting again. "The hollow took them because I couldn't give it what it wanted, but it's never stopped asking. Keep it buried, Claire. Please." The bell in the box trembled once, releasing a soft chime that seemed to echo from every beam of the house above. Claire slammed the lid shut and backed out, heart pounding. Rain began again, sudden and heavy, drumming against the porch roof. She looked up at the house, her childhood home, and for an instant thought she saw her father's silhouette in the window, watching. She got into her cruiser and drove, tires spitting gravel, headlights slicing through sheets of rain. Her radio crackled, Harris's voice breaking through static. "Claire, we've got movement at the hollow. Someone's broken the seal on the tunnel. Stay put till backup arrives," but she was already turning the wheel. "I'm 10 minutes out," she said. "Don't wait for me." The bell's chime seemed to follow her through the storm. Rain fell in hard, slanted sheets as Deputy Claire Donnelly guided her cruiser down the twisting road toward Weaver's Hollow. Lightning forked across the hills, throwing the trees into skeletal relief. The radio hissed with bursts of static between fragments of Harris's voice. "Seal's been breached. Tracks near the pit. Unknown vehicle. Backup ETA 15 minutes. "Copy," she said, gripping the wheel tighter. The wipers struggled to keep up. She could taste iron in the rain that leaked through the open window, metallic and familiar. The smell of the hollow. By the time she reached the site, floodlights flickered in the wind, painting the mud in pulses of white. The tents had collapsed under the storm's weight. The yellow tape lay shredded, whipping against the ground like ribbons. The pit yawned open again. Someone had dragged away the steel mesh cover. A rope dangled down into the black mouth of the tunnel. Claire stepped out, the mud sucking at her boots. "Harris?" she called. Only the rain answered. She swept her flashlight across the site. Tire tracks led to the edge of the pit, fresh, cutting through the softened ground. Whoever had broken in hadn't left. Her gaze fell on a set of footprints, smaller than an adult's, bare. They stopped at the rope. The descent felt steeper than before. The storm above roared like an ocean trapped in the sky. Water trickled down the shaft, making the rungs slick. Her flashlight beam shook as she climbed, and she forced herself to count each step aloud. 10, 11, 12. The air grew colder. At the base, she landed in ankle-deep water. Her light found the tunnel ahead, its walls gleaming with moisture, ceiling dripping like a heartbeat. The rope beside her swung gently, swaying as though someone had just used it. "Base, this is Donnelly," she said into her radio. "I'm underground. Possible trespasser. No visual, yet static. Then silence." She moved forward. The tunnel walls seemed to close around her, narrowing until her shoulders brushed the rock. The deeper she went, the clearer she could hear it. The hum she'd felt before, low and steady, like machinery buried in the bones of the earth. Her beam caught movement ahead. Just a flicker. She froze, listening. Then came a sound that made her blood go cold. A child's voice, faint but distinct. "Help us!" She swung the light wildly. The tunnel was empty. Her breath clouded the air. She whispered, "Leah?" But even saying the name felt wrong, like calling into a mouth that might answer with something else. A few yards farther, the tunnel split into two branches. One led downward, partially collapsed. The other opened into a wide chamber shored with old timbers. That was where she saw the lantern glow. Someone was inside. She raised her weapon. "Sheriff's Department, drop the light and step out." A figure moved into view, hooded raincoat, back turned. The lantern trembled in his hand. "Turn around," she ordered. Slowly, he did. It was Harris. His face was pale beneath the flickering light. Mud streaked his uniform. "You shouldn't have come here," he said. His voice was steady, but something hollow lurked beneath it. "You broke the seal?" she demanded. "Why?" He looked past her, into the dark behind. "Because it won't stay buried." "You know that now." Claire took a step closer. "What are you talking about?" "The hollow," he said softly. "Your father thought he could feed it lies. Thought if he buried the truth deep enough, it would starve." His gaze dropped to the ground between them. "But it doesn't starve, Claire. It waits." Lightning flashed through cracks in the shaft above, throwing blue light over everything. For a second, she thought she saw shapes moving in the wet walls, faces, small and pale, pressed just beneath the surface. She steadied her voice. "Where's my father, Harris?" He met her eyes. "He's part of it now." "We all are. Once we dig too deep." Her hand tightened on her weapon. "Don't move." He didn't. Instead, he set the lantern on the ground and stepped back. "You think this is about ghosts, but it's not. It's about what we did, about what your father made us do. What did he make you do?" Harris exhaled slowly. "Those kids, they found something in the mine, an opening no one had touched in a century. When your father got there, they were already gone. We searched for days. Then we heard them, singing." His voice cracked, but it wasn't singing like a child. It was like the air itself had learned their voices. "We sealed the tunnel, said it was an abduction, told the families lies to keep them from digging." Claire's vision blurred. "You helped him cover it up. I helped him survive," Harris said, "until he didn't anymore." The hum rose, filling the chamber, vibrating through their bones. The lantern's flame fluttered. Harris looked up. "You hear it, don't you?" The ground's remembering again. The floor beneath them trembled. A rivulet of mud slid from the ceiling, followed by a thin stream of water. The tunnel was shifting, waking. "Move!" Claire shouted, grabbing Harris by the arm. They sprinted toward the shaft, mud splashing underfoot. The beam of her flashlight bounced across the walls, revealing momentary glimpses, small handprints smeared in clay, eyes like glass marbles reflecting her light. Halfway up the ladder, the tremor became a roar. The earth groaned, timbers splintering. Water surged up from below. Claire reached the surface first, dragging herself out into the storm. Harris climbed behind her, coughing, soaked and shaking. The pit convulsed once, then collapsed inward with a thunderous crack. A plume of black water erupted, then subsided into silence. Claire fell to her knees, gasping. "What was that?" she demanded. Harris sat in the mud, eyes distant. "It's never over. You can seal a tunnel, but you can't seal guilt." Sirens wailed in the distance. Backup finally arriving. Headlights cut through the rain. Claire turned toward them, but when she looked back, Harris was gone. Only his lantern remained, flickering beside the ruined pit. By morning, the storm had passed. The site was cordoned off again, this time by state authorities. Reporters swarmed the perimeter, shouting questions Claire couldn't answer. She gave her statement mechanically. Tunnel breach, collapse, possible fatality. No, she didn't see where Detective Harris went. Yes, she was fine. Inside, she was far from fine. She sat in the command trailer staring at the lantern, now extinguished. Mud still clung to its glass. The hum had faded from her ears, but she could feel its echo in her chest. A forensic tech entered quietly. "Deputy Donnelly?" "We found something in the debris." He handed her a sealed evidence bag. Inside was a badge. Harris's, crusted with mud. Scratched into the metal beneath his name was a single word: remember. The word seemed to arrive in 4 soft beats. That night she returned to her apartment, unable to stay away from the evidence board covering her wall. Strings connected photos of the children, the mine, her father. She pinned Harris's badge at the center. Around it she wrote one question: what does the hollow remember? Then she pulled out her father's note again. "It remembers. I thought I could contain it." The words lined up perfectly with Harris's. They'd both said the same thing, years apart. Her phone buzzed. A new message. No number, no header. "You can still feed it." A map image followed. An aerial view of Weaver's Creek, the red circle marking a spot half a mile downstream. Claire stared at it, pulse quickening. If the hollow was opening new ground, she had to see it herself. She grabbed her jacket and keys. As she stepped into the night, the sound came again from somewhere just behind her door. A faint, deliberate chime. Not loud, not menacing, just patient, waiting. Claire reached the bend of Weaver's Creek just after midnight. The storm clouds had broken, leaving tatters of fog that clung to the trees like smoke. Her cruiser idled on the shoulder, headlights dimmed to slivers. Down below, the creek shimmered under moonlight. Narrow now, the drought and storm runoff carving fresh channels through the mud. She checked the phone again. "You can still feed it." The message stared back, the red circle blinking like a wound on the satellite image. She slipped her sidearm into its holster, grabbed a flashlight, and started down the embankment. The smell hit her first. Wet clay and something older, sour, the odor of turned graves. Each step sucked at her boots. Halfway down, her beam picked out a glint. Metal. A length of cable protruding from the mud, similar to the tag she'd found near the pit. She followed it until the ground gave way to a shallow hollow lined with river stones. At its center, water burbled through a cracked drainage pipe. And there, half buried, was another box. This one was smaller, almost delicate, wrapped in decaying cloth. She crouched, pulse hammering. The latch broke easily beneath her fingers. Inside lay a stack of cassette tapes sealed in plastic bags, their labels faded but legible. Interview A, Kersey Farm. July 27th. Read testimony. Her father's handwriting. She sat back hard in the mud, breath catching. Read testimony. The name jolted something from the case files. A handyman who'd worked for the Kerseys, questioned once and cleared. She remembered her father's note in the margin. Reed knows the hollow. Avoids direct answers, Claire turned one of the tapes over in her hand. A faint rust line marred the edge. as if someone had tried to pry it open. Beneath the cassettes lay a single photograph, water-stained but intact. Her father standing beside a bearded man in overalls, Reed himself, both smiling stiffly in front of the farmhouse porch. Scrawled across the bottom in shaky blue ink, "He showed me where they sleep." Thunder rumbled far off, rolling through the valley. Claire shoved the tapes into her jacket and climbed back toward the road, slipping once on the wet slope. The moment her hand hit the mud, she felt a vibration, soft, rhythmic. Not thunder this time, a pulse from the earth below, matching the beat of her heart. She froze. The creek's surface trembled, though no wind moved it, concentric rings spreading outward from nothing. "Not real," she whispered. "It's just the water receding." The vibration stopped. When she reached the cruiser, she found a smear of mud on the driver's side window. Not random, but deliberate. A child's handprint, small and perfect. Inside the print, the finger marks had traced a single word: listen. By the time Claire reached the station's evidence lab, dawn had started bleeding pale gray through the blinds. She shut the door behind her, set the cassette box on the table, and switched on the single overhead light. The faint hum of the old player filled the silence. The first tape's label read, "Interview A, Kersey Farm." The plastic casing was warped, edges swollen from years in the ground. She slid it into the player and pressed play. A hiss, then a man's voice. Calm, official, unmistakably her father's. Interview with Richard Reed, July 27th, 1994, concerning the disappearance of the 4 Kersey cousins. Another voice answered, low and gravelly. "I told you already, Doc. I just fix fences. Don't go down there anymore." "Down where?" her father prompted. A pause, then softer. "The hollow. The old Weaver drift. You said to stay out, so I did. But you said you heard something from the shaft that night. Voices, like kids playing in the dark, but they weren't laughing, more like humming." The tape crackled. Claire felt goose flesh crawl up her arms. "Mr. Reed, did you tell anyone else?" "Didn't have to. They came to me. Said it wanted company again." Static swallowed the next few seconds. When the voices returned, her father sounded different, tired, almost frightened. "If you're lying, you're protecting someone. If you're telling the truth, we're standing on something that's still breathing." The recording clicked off. Claire sat frozen, fingers hovering above the rewind button. It wanted company again. The phrase echoed in her mind. She grabbed another tape. July 28, 1994, personal notes. The labels smeared, but the writing unmistakably her father's. The player clicked, hissed. His voice returned, this time quieter, as though whispered into the recorder after hours. "It isn't the ground. It's memory. It feeds on remembering." Reed's terrified because he remembers too much. Maybe that's why the children vanished, because they listened. He exhaled, shaky. "If anything happens, Claire, don't come here. Promise me that." The recording stopped. Claire leaned back, pressing her hands over her mouth. "You left this for me," she murmured. "You knew I'd come." She stared at the player's spinning reels, then ejected the tape. On its back, a streak of dried red-brown mud had sealed the edge. She scraped a flake loose with her nail. Beneath it, faint but legible, was a penciled arrow pointing to the inner spool, and a single word: bridge. Outside, the early light sharpened the horizon. The Weaver's Creek Bridge lay 2 miles upstream, a rusted structure half swallowed by vines. Locals avoided it, claiming the boards groaned even when no wind passed through. By 7 a.m., Claire's cruiser rattled to a stop beside it. Mist rose off the water, turning the bridge's reflection into a wavering specter. She stepped out, cassette still in her jacket pocket, and walked onto the planks. Each footfall echoed into the quiet. Halfway across, she saw it, A length of rope knotted to the railing, disappearing into the water below. Tied to the end was something heavy wrapped in black plastic. Her pulse kicked. She crouched, tugged the rope, and the shape rolled against the current, roughly human-sized. She pulled her phone, called dispatch. Unit 47 to base. Possible body recovery at Weaver's Creek Bridge. Need coroner and dive team. Before the dispatcher could respond, the call cut to static. Then, beneath the interference, a faint childlike whisper. "You're late." The line went dead. Claire dropped the phone, stared down at the dark water. For a heartbeat, she thought she saw faces beneath the ripples, 4 small outlines drifting upward. Then only her reflection, pale and trembling. She backed away slowly, eyes never leaving the surface. The rope gave a single twitch, as if something below had tugged it back, and then the hum returned, low, rising through the planks until she could feel it in her bones. By the time the dive team arrived, the mist had thickened into a silver veil over the creek. Claire stood near the patrol barrier, arms folded against the chill, watching 2 men in dry suits wade into the water. Each movement stirred plumes of silt that turned the current the color of smoke. "Water temp's dropping fast," one of them called. "Whatever's down here, it's heavy." The rope still trailed from the railing where she'd found it. Claire's phone, sealed in an evidence bag, sat on the hood of her cruiser. Its battery dead, though she'd charged it that morning. She pretended not to notice the way the bridge vibrated faintly beneath her boots, a pulse that matched the rhythm she'd felt at the riverbank. "Detective, we've got it," a diver shouted. The men struggled against the suction as they dragged the wrapped object to the shallows. When they finally hauled it onto the mud, the plastic tore at one corner, revealing a flash of pale bone. Claire crouched beside it. Not a full body. Half of a human skeleton fused to a section of corroded steel mesh, like fencing twisted around it. The skull was missing, but a small leather strap still hung from the ribs, the kind used to secure a miner's lamp. "Looks old," said one diver, breathless. "Maybe a century." Claire's gaze fixed on the tag dangling from the strap. The lettering was almost gone, but 2 initials remained beneath the rust. R. Reed Richardson. Her father's suspect. She felt her stomach turn. The wind picked up, rippling the fog. Something metallic clinked against the bridge above, a nail shaken loose, spinning into the water. The forensics van pulled up moments later. Technicians moved quickly, photographing, sealing, cataloging. Claire stood apart, eyes on the current that slid past the skeleton's half-buried limbs. "Detective?" one tech called. "There's something else here." From the deeper silt, they lifted a small waterproof case. Inside lay another cassette, its label intact despite the grime. Final interview, July 31st, 1994. The same date her father's field journal ended. Claire's hands trembled as she took the case. "Bag it," she ordered quietly. "We'll run it at HQ." Back at the station, she sat alone in the evidence lab again. The cassette glimmered under the fluorescent light, droplets of river water still beating its surface. She slid it into the player, exhaled, and pressed play. A burst of static, then her father's voice, hoarse, weary. Interview with subject Reed, continuation, July 31st, 1990. "You shouldn't have come back," Reed's voice replied, faint, ragged. "It doesn't like being remembered." "Who doesn't?" "The hollow. It keeps what it's given." The children woke it up. Now it wants them to sing again. "Reed, you need to tell me what you did with them." "Didn't touch 'em. Just listened. You hear it long enough, you start to hum too." There was a long silence broken only by distant dripping water, then a muffled thud, metal scraping, a chair overturning. Her father's voice, sharp now. "Put that down! You don't—" A gunshot exploded through the tape, then nothing but the hiss of the recorder running to its end. Claire stared at the machine, heartbeat hammering in her throat. The tape had captured her father's final moments. She'd always believed he died in a collapse while searching for the missing children. Now she knew someone had been there with him, Reed, and possibly something else. She rewound the last seconds, playing them again. After the gunshot, beneath the hiss, she caught a faint sound. A low humming. Not mechanical, not human. A vibration like the one she'd felt through the bridge boards, building, resonant, almost melodic. She stopped the tape. The humming didn't. It was in the walls now, in the fluorescent light fixture, in the bones behind her ears. Claire rose slowly, eyes wide. "You're just remembering," she whispered. "It's memory." That's all. But the sound swelled until the ceiling tiles shivered, and in the reflection of the cassette's plastic window, she saw 4 small shadows moving behind her. By morning, the hum had faded, but its afterimage pulsed in Claire's skull like a migraine. She hadn't gone home. Instead, she sat in the records room, a low, windowless corridor beneath the station that smelled of dust and ozone, surrounded by boxes stamped Weaver's Hollow Archive. The light above her flickered. She told herself it was the ballast, not the echo. She unsealed the first carton. Inside lay her father's case notes, yellowed and curling. Maps of the hollow sketched in pencil, marginalia in his slanted hand. Drainage tunnels older than the mines. Check County Survey, 1894. Each page felt warmer than paper should, as if it had absorbed his pulse. In the bottom corner of one folder was an evidence log marked Restricted Audio. Claire traced the listing until she found a missing entry. Reel number 9. Unindexed. The signature line was blank. She rose, crossed to the cabinet labeled Cold Storage. A padlock hung loose, unlatched. The door creaked open on frost-rimmed hinges. Inside, on the middle shelf, sat a metal canister with number 9 scratched into its lid. Her breath clouded the air as she lifted it out. The reel smelled faintly of iron and something sour. She threaded it through the player, flicked the switch. The tape began to turn with a dry whisper. A man's voice emerged, strained, as if whispered through a long pipe. "It never sleeps." Not once in all the years. When they stopped singing, it called for others. Claire froze. It wasn't Reed. It wasn't her father either. "You can hear it under the floorboards," the voice continued. "Listen long enough, and it starts to remember you." The sound warped, then reversed itself, words unraveling backward. Claire yanked the stop lever. The reel spun to a halt, rattling against the hub like teeth. She rewound, pressed play again. Silence this time, except for a faint metallic drip, steady as a heartbeat. Then her father's voice cut in suddenly, gasping, "If anyone hears this, don't come to the echo room." The recording ended with a click that seemed to echo far beyond the player. Claire looked around. The term echo room wasn't in any of his reports. She opened the next box of files, rifling until she found a blueprint of the old sheriff's annex built into the limestone bluff decades earlier. At the edge of the drawing was a shaded rectangle labeled ER. No door, just a thick outline where the basement wall should be. She pulled out her phone and snapped a photo. The signal bar flickered, then dropped to 0. The stairwell to the annex was narrow and damp. Condensation glimmered on the rail as she descended. Each step deeper brought a colder breath of air. The lowest door was sealed with rusted bolts. She pried at them until one snapped, the sound ricocheting down the hall like a shot. Inside, a faint light glowed from somewhere beyond, a low, pulsing amber. She stepped through. The room was circular, hewn directly from the rock. Shelves lined the walls, each filled with reel-to-reel tapes, hundreds of them, their labels long bled away. At the center stood an old microphone on a stand, still connected to a reel recorder. The red record light was on. Claire's pulse quickened. She hadn't powered anything. She approached slowly, the crunch of gravel underfoot loud in the stillness. Her reflection trembled in the chrome of the microphone. She could almost hear her own breath looping back, a fraction late, an echo chasing itself. Then, from the recorder's speaker, her father's voice whispered, alive, immediate. "Claire, you found it." She staggered back, heart stuttering. "Dad?" "Don't answer aloud," the voice said softly. "It listens through repetition." The reels spun faster, their tape hissing like wind through a mine shaft. "What listens?" she whispered before she could stop herself. For a heartbeat, the whole room seemed to inhale. And then, from every speaker, came the reply. Her own voice. "I do." The lights blew out. Darkness swallowed her before she could breathe. The air smelled of damp stone and old copper. Claire groped for her flashlight. The beam stuttered to life, slicing a thin cone through the black. Dust swirled like ash in its path. The microphone still stood at the center, lifeless now. The reels had stopped turning, yet the faint hum persisted. Not through the speakers this time, but through the rock itself, a low vibration rising from the floor into her bones. She turned toward the doorway she had entered from. Only blank wall met her light. The opening had sealed, a slab of limestone now where the door had been. "No," she whispered. "No, no." Her own voice echoed back, but not perfectly. The second "no" arrived a heartbeat too soon, as though someone behind her had repeated it. Claire spun. The room was empty. The shelves stretched around in a perfect circle, each crammed with reels labeled in her father's handwriting. March 1989. April 1990. Unsolved. At the very top row, a new label gleamed fresh white. July 2024. Weaver's Hollow recovered. She hadn't written that. The vibration intensified. One of the reels dislodged itself and fell, unspooling tape across the floor in a black ribbon. The hiss of unwinding magnetic film filled the chamber, a sound that wasn't quite mechanical, not quite human. She forced herself toward the center console and pressed every switch off. The hum remained. The tape on the floor had begun to move on its own, curling toward her boot like something alive. Claire stepped back and aimed her flashlight across the room. The beam landed on a hatch in the rock wall, a small iron door half buried in salt deposits. Faded letters above it read, "Archive B." If there was another exit, it had to be there. She yanked the handle. It resisted, then gave with a shriek of rust. A gust of air rushed out, dry and cold, smelling faintly of decay. A narrow tunnel stretched beyond, supported by timber beams gone gray with age. On the closest beam, her father's initials had been carved, R.D., followed by 4 smaller marks, each a simple vertical line. 4 children. She ducked inside. The passage sloped downward, the hum growing louder until it became a rhythm, almost a song. Somewhere ahead, water dripped in slow, even beats. After perhaps 50 feet, the tunnel widened into a small chamber. Lanterns, old carbide ones, hung from nails, their wicks long dead. In the dust, she saw shoe prints, small ones, preserved like fossils. At the far end stood another reel-to-reel device, ancient but intact, its microphone wrapped in cloth. A tag dangled from the cord, for the next one who remembers. Claire hesitated, then unwrapped the microphone. The cloth smelled of river silt. She brushed the dust off the switch and flicked it. The reels began to spin on their own, though the machine had no power source. Her father's voice again, faint, echoing through the dark. The echo room was never meant for storage. It was built to contain resonance, memory made audible. The miners found it first, but the sound was older than them. They recorded it, thinking they could map it. They only fed it. The hum beneath her feet matched his words. If you're hearing this, it means it has found another voice. Don't let it use yours. The recording ended. Silence returned, except for the dripping water and Claire's own heartbeat. She turned back toward the tunnel, but the passage behind her was gone again, swallowed by rock. Panic surged through her chest. She shouted, and the sound bounced around the chamber in layers. Her own voice multiplied, distorted, whispering different words. Stay. Feed it. Remember. Claire pressed her palms to her ears. Stop. Everything went silent. Then, softly, from the microphone came her father's voice one last time. It's never been the hollow that's alive, Claire. It's us. The reel stopped. A fine dust began to fall from the ceiling, glittering in the flashlight beam like snow. Through it, she saw new footprints appear beside her own, bare, small, 4 sets, leading back toward the sealed wall. And then she heard it, faint but unmistakable. Children humming somewhere inside the stone. By the time the rescue team reached the old annex, the rain had stopped, but the valley still steamed. The generator lights threw long white arcs across the crumbling limestone facade. Lieutenant Morales from State Search and Rescue signed the log, while 2 techs unloaded sonar equipment. Deputy Donnelly's last radio ping was right here, Morales said, tapping a handheld receiver. Then nothing. No EMF, no cell, no thermal detective Harris, face gray, uniform still mud-stained from the collapse, stood beside him. That room wasn't on any blueprint. We only found it when the floor gave way. The tech swept the scanner over the rock wall. A hollow tone echoed back, thin and metallic. There's a cavity 2 meters in, he said. Small, circular, like a cistern. Drill point here, Morales ordered. They set the corer against the wall. The machine whined. Dust plumed out in clouds. After a minute, the bit punched through. Cold air spilled from the hole, stale and mineral, carrying a faint scent of ozone. Morales bent close, listening. Hear that? Harris nodded. The drill's whine had stopped, yet the sound remained. A whisper just below hearing, rhythmic, like breath pulled through stone. Inside the command tent, monitors flickered with feed from seismic sensors. The vibrations registered low, continuous, almost musical. Could be groundwater resonance, a geologist offered, or a generator feedback loop, another suggested. Harris stared at the frequency trace scrolling across the screen. The pattern looked familiar. Peaks forming repeating shapes, almost letters. His chest tightened. Freeze that. On the screen, the waveform spelled 3 jagged syllables. Claire. The room went silent. Morales leaned forward. That a coincidence? Before anyone could answer, the intercom crackled. A thin voice broke through the static. This is Deputy Donnelly. Then only static again. Patch it through, Harris barked. The tech twisted the dial. The signal strengthened for an instant, carrying fragments of her voice. Strained, distant. Don't dig! They're not gone! Then a burst of feedback screamed through the speakers, sharp enough to make everyone flinch. When it cleared, the audio looped back. Not her words, exactly, but the shape of them, rearranged by echo. Gone. Not gone. Remember. The line went dead. Hours later, a narrow borehole finally opened into the chamber. The first rescuer dropped a fiber optic camera through. The feed showed swirling dust, glints of reflective tape, and the faint outline of a figure crouched near the center. She's there, Morales said. She's alive. The camera panned closer, but the image shimmered, breaking into twin reflections. 2 Claires, one perfectly still, one whispering to the wall. The signal fractured into static. Pull it back! When the line retracted, the lens was coated in fine white powder that hissed faintly against the air. A chemist dabbed a sample onto a slide. Calcium carbonate mixed with silica and... She frowned. Something biological, like ossified tissue. Harris felt the hairs rise on his arms. Bone dust? Maybe. He turned toward the wall. Keep drilling. We're getting her out. 2 hours later, when they broke through, the room was empty. No Claire, no equipment. Only a single reel-to-reel recorder still turning, though its power cord hung severed. Morales approached cautiously. The tape hissed. A woman's voice played through the speaker, quiet, calm, almost serene. If you find this, don't worry. I'm not lost. I just learned how to listen. Harris's knees nearly gave out. God, Claire, the voice continued, overlapping itself, each echo a fraction out of sync. It remembers. It always did. The recorder stopped. The room fell silent except for the faint hum of the ground beneath them, steady, measured, like breathing. They brought the recorder up from the annex, sealed in a plastic case, its reels still trembling as if they hadn't quite stopped. The forensic lab smelled of disinfectant and ozone. The air handlers thumped overhead like a slow pulse. Dr. Finch from the State Bureau leaned over the table. Let's start with a dry run. No playback through speakers. Headphones only. Harris nodded. Do it. A tech patched the machine through a digital interface. The reels began to turn. At first, there was nothing but static, a hiss that sounded like rain on metal. Then, beneath it, a woman's breath, measured, deliberate. Testing. Harris, can you hear me? The voice was unmistakable. Finch's eyes widened. That's Donnelly. Don't open another shaft. It listens through open air. The signal wavered. A second, deeper tone undercut it. A low hum that made the monitors vibrate. The waveform pulsed in patterns, repeating every 7 seconds. The tech adjusted the filter. She's talking over something else, another layer of sound. When he isolated the background track, the speakers filled with children's voices, faint and distant, humming a slow, circular melody. Finch removed her headset, pale. That's not feedback. Harris swallowed hard. Keep it running. The melody shifted pitch until it matched the room's air handler rhythm. Then the recording bled into real time. The monitors flickered. Claire's voice spoke again, but this time it didn't come from the headphones. It came from everywhere. You shouldn't be here. Every computer fan and fluorescent ballast vibrated in sync. The waveform on screen flattened, then bloomed outward, forming new peaks that spelled letters across the trace. E-C-H-O. Finch whispered, "Shut it down." The tech yanked the cord. The reels stopped, but the hum continued for another 30 seconds before fading to silence. When the room finally steadied, Harris realized his own heart was pounding in perfect time with the hum's rhythm. He pressed a hand to his chest, forced himself to breathe out of sync. Finch sat down heavily. We'll analyze the spectrum. There must be an explanation. Electromagnetic resonance, brainwave entrainment, something. He didn't answer. His attention was fixed on the recorder's glass window. Inside, the tape was still moving, only backward now, inching against the spools, though the motor was dead. He leaned closer. For a heartbeat, his reflection on the glass wasn't his own. Claire's eyes looked back at him. He staggered away, knocking a tray of evidence vials to the floor. They shattered like ice. Finch caught his arm. Harris, look at me. You need sleep. He nodded mechanically. Right. Sleep. But as he left the lab, the corridor lights flickered in sequence. 4 quick pulses, a pause, then 4 again. The same pattern the Kersey children's flashlights had shown the night they vanished, according to the old reports. Outside, the air was cool, rain clean. Harris stood by his car, staring toward the ridge where the hollow slept beneath layers of fog. The sound of crickets filled the night. Steady, then slowing, their rhythm matching his heartbeat once more. He opened his phone, intending to call Morales. Instead, the screen lit on its own, an audio file queuing up automatically. Its title, Residual 09. He pressed play before he could stop himself. "You can't pull me back, not all the way." Claire's voice again, calm and close, as though she sat in the passenger seat beside him. "But I can still help you listen." The hollow remembers through whoever listens. The file ended in a soft chime, the sound of a bell striking water. Harris closed the phone, throat dry. Somewhere deep under the hills, the hum began again. So faint it could have been imagination, but steady enough that he knew it wasn't. He turned the key in the ignition, headlights cutting the dark, and whispered to the empty seat. "Then keep talking, Claire. I'm still listening." Morning spread thin over Weaver's Hollow. Mist clung to the ridges like breath. Detective Harris parked at the service road where the creek narrowed into limestone cuts. His phone still showed the file name Residual 09 on its screen, but the playback bar was gone, as if the message had never existed. He carried only a field recorder, flashlight, and his father's old revolver. Rituals of control for a man who no longer believed in control. The state had fenced off the pit and annex, yet someone had cut the wire in neat triangles. Mud showed fresh tire grooves leading toward the collapsed west drift. He ducked beneath the tape, the air heavy with the scent of rust and cedar. Inside the pit, silence pressed against his eardrums like altitude. The last storm had stripped away another layer of clay, revealing a corrugated metal hatch half embedded in the slope. Its padlock was broken. He crouched. The hatch bore an engraving he didn't remember from any survey map. Listener Station, B1. He hesitated only a moment before pushing it open. The hinges groaned, echoing down a steel corridor lined with cables and old speakers. The air felt charged, the way it does before lightning. He clicked on the recorder. "Detective Harris, entry log 1, following unidentified signal beneath hollow, possible unauthorized excavation." His own voice rebounded softly from the speakers overhead, then again, slower, lower. He frowned. "Test?" The echo answered. Not a true repeat, but a reply. "Tested." He froze. The word had been his, but the tone was wrong, softer, feminine. "Claire?" Silence, then a faint rhythmic tapping through the conduit walls. 4 beats, pause, 4 beats. The Kersey pattern. He swallowed hard. "If you can hear me, tell me where you are. Everywhere you listen." His flashlight flickered. For a heartbeat, the walls seemed to ripple, images moving across the metal like reflections on water. Photographs, hundreds of them. His own face, Claire's, the children's, his father's badge. Each image dissolved into the next, leaving behind only the shimmer of sound. Harris stumbled backward. "You're not her," he whispered. The echo returned, half a sigh, half a laugh. "Greater than neither are you." He steadied the recorder against his chest, forcing his breathing into even counts. If this is residual energy, it's mimicking cognition. A tempting conversation. He wanted to believe that, wanted the words to anchor him to the rational world. The corridor widened into a circular chamber filled with hanging microphones. At the center stood a console of analog dials and reels, each turning without power. The labels were meticulous. Echo A, Reed, Echo B, R. Donnelly, Echo C, Claire. The last reel was still recording. Harris leaned close. "Claire, I'm here." Her voice emerged through the overhead speakers, clear as breath on glass. "I told you not to dig." He swallowed. "You're alive." "Alive isn't the right word." He looked down. The recorder in his hand was spinning, even though he'd never pressed record. On its tiny screen, new text scrolled across automatically. Harris, Echo D. "Don't," he said aloud, stepping back. "You don't need me." The hollow keeps what it's given. You listened too long. The microphone swayed, though no air moved. Static gathered around his ears, resolving into a soft hum. The same pitch that had haunted the lab, now beating exactly with his pulse. He tried to switch off the recorder. The button stuck. The reels on the console whirred faster, spitting tape across the floor. Voices layered on top of one another, Claire's, the children's, his own, forming one continuous note that wasn't language at all. Only need. Harris shouted over it. "Tell me what you want." The sound cut off so suddenly that his ears rang. Then, very quietly, from the nearest microphone, "You already know." Something dripped onto his sleeve. Clear water, or maybe tears shaken from the condenser. He lifted the mic. Inside its cage, the membrane pulsed like a heartbeat. He whispered, "I'm sorry," and the word echoed back perfectly in his own voice, only older. Then the lights died. When the lights blinked out, the dark didn't come quietly. It dropped like a curtain of weight. Harris could still hear the faint spin of tape somewhere in front of him, that tiny rasp of magnetic film sliding across heads. His flashlight refused to spark. Only the recorder's red pilot light glowed in his hand, a heartbeat inside plastic. He spoke for the log, voice shaking. "Detective Harris, Station B1, power failure. I'm continuing audio documentation." The sound returned to him at once. "Continuing documentation." Then softer, an echo below the echo. "Confession." He froze. "Claire." "Keep talking," the voice said. "That's how it remembers." Harris forced breath through his teeth. "You said it keeps what it's given." "You mean people." "Memories." "Same thing," it answered. "You gave it silence for years. Now give it truth." He tried to move, but the floor vibrated, a slow pulse rolling up through his knees. He steadied himself against the console. Every meter of tape in the room was spooling, unspooling, like lungs expanding and collapsing. "Truth," he said quietly. "All right." He turned the recorder toward himself and began. "I was there the night the children disappeared. Your father called me to the farmhouse. He'd found the mine entrance open. We heard them singing inside." He swallowed. "We went down. We saw the light, white, moving, breathing, and they were standing in it. The air vibrated so hard I thought my skull would crack. Your father grabbed my arm and said, 'If it wants company, we'll give it us instead.' I ran. He didn't." The hum deepened. The microphones around the room leaned toward him as if listening closer. "And after, I buried what I saw," Harris whispered. "Helped them build the story. Abduction, wild dogs, anything. I told myself I'd save the town. You saved the lie." The light on his recorder brightened until it hurt to look at. "Why now?" he asked. "Why bring me back?" "Because you kept listening." A sudden pressure filled the air, not sound, but density. The room's steel walls rippled outward like a drumhead struck from within. Harris dropped to his knees, covering his ears though the noise was inside him now, low and endless, rising until it became a chord threaded with voices. Claire's voice emerged from the harmony, calm and near. "You don't have to run anymore." He looked up. The consoles had gone still. In the center of the room, a shape shimmered, water suspended in air, forming a rough human outline. Within it flickered fragments of faces. His father, Claire, the children. Harris reached out. The surface rippled under his hand, cold, then warm. He felt the vibration slide into his bones like breath shared. "Listen," it said, not words, but a feeling, and he understood. The hum softened, folding into quiet. The microphone stopped moving. For the first time since the hollow reopened, the air felt still. He pressed stop on the recorder. The pilot light went dark. Hours later, Morales' rescue crew entered the corridor. They found the console powered down, the reels empty, the microphone silent. No sign of Harris. Only his field recorder resting on the floor. They played it back at headquarters. The first minutes were his familiar voice describing entry, then static, then a new tone, steady, harmonic, layered with whispers. At the 10-minute mark, a woman's voice, Claire's spoke softly. He's listening now. So are you. The recording ended with 4 slow pulses of silence, perfectly spaced. Finch stared at the waveform on screen. That pattern, she murmured, looks like respiration. Morales rubbed the back of his neck. You think he's alive down there? Finch didn't answer. On the monitor, the trace suddenly continued on its own, new peaks forming, spelling a single word. Remember. And from the speakers, faint but certain, 2 voices together. Harris and Claire whispered in unison, "We do." 3 days after the disappearance of Detective Harris, the Greene County Sheriff's Building sounded wrong. Every vent, every pipe, every computer fan hummed a half-step lower than usual, as if the building were tuning itself. Dr. Yara Finch sat alone in the audio forensics suite, surrounded by oscilloscopes and screens filled with slow-moving spectrograms. The recovered reel, Harris's last, turned on a digital spindle beside her. The waveform looked calm enough, no bursts, no feedback, just that steady pulse like a sleeping heart. She pressed play. So are you? Claire's voice again, then silence. Finch leaned closer. Beneath the quiet, a frequency just under human hearing murmured against the speakers. She boosted the gain. A pattern bloomed. 4 pulses, pause, 4 pulses. She exhaled. The children's code, she whispered. The lab lights dimmed slightly, compensating for power draw. She checked the time. 3:07 a.m., then hit record on a fresh track. Experiment 1, she said softly into her mic, attempting reverse phase isolation of sub-60 Hz components. She inverted the signal. The hum vanished. For a moment the room was still. Then the playback monitor began printing text across its screen, letters forming slowly as though typed by unseen hands. "Hello, Yara." Her breath hitched. "This is an automated diagnostic," she told herself, but the keyboard was dark. No system was active except the reel. "You listen well." The speakers crackled. Harris's voice slid through the static. "It's all right. We're only memory now." Finch's throat tightened. "Detective Harris, if this is a stored imprint, identify source. Source is what listens." She killed the monitor, heart hammering. The room went dark except for the soft red glow from the reel's spindle. She sat very still, willing the adrenaline to ebb. The glow pulsed once, twice, and the speakers filled with the sound of running water. Then a child's laughter, faint, rising from somewhere deep under the floor. Finch snatched up her recorder. "Field note, 0308 hours, she whispered. "Acoustic bleed from sub-basement?" "Checking." She opened the door into the corridor. The laughter had already retreated, replaced by a low drone that matched the building's new pitch. Each fluorescent tube flickered in sequence. 4, pause, 4. At the stairwell, a breeze lifted from below, cold and mineral. She descended. The deeper she went, the clearer the sound became. Harris's voice and Claire's interwoven, speaking as one. "We can't close it. We are it now." The landing light sputtered, then steadied. She realized she was standing before the old records vault. Door cracked, faint orange glow seeping through. The same vault where Claire had found her father's envelope weeks earlier. She pushed the door open. Inside, every tape, file, and photograph was vibrating gently against the shelves, as if stirred by a shared heartbeat. At the far wall, a portable recorder rested on a crate, red light blinking. Its display read, "New message, Claire." Finch crossed the room slowly and pressed play. "Dr. Finch," Claire's voice said, calm, almost tender. "Don't be afraid. The hollow isn't hungry anymore. It only wants to be heard." Finch swallowed. "Where are you?" "Everywhere the recording plays. You're hearing what it remembered of me." "What about Harris?" "He's still listening." The sound warped. stretching into a low note that vibrated the shelves. Files toppled. Dust lifted like smoke. "If you want it to end," Claire's voice whispered, now inches from Finch's ear, though no one stood there. "Turn off the microphones." Finch looked at the hundreds of open recorders, all their red eyes blinking. "I can't shut them all down." "Then at least stop speaking." The reel clicked off. The hum ceased. For the first time in months, Weaver's Hollow was silent. Finch stood in that silence, heart pounding, aware that the quiet itself was listening back. By dawn, the building was still quiet, the sort of quiet that feels thick, as if air has turned to glass. Dr. Yara Finch hadn't gone home. She sat in front of the master console inside the sheriff's communications room, coffee gone cold beside her. Every open channel on the board carried the same low carrier tone, one continuous frequency that stretched across every bandwidth the county used. 911, dispatch, weather band, all of them humming. Finch keyed the microphone. "Central broadcast test," she said softly. "If you can hear this, respond." Static. Then her own voice, slightly delayed. "Central broadcast test, respond." She exhaled. Of course. She reached for the power main but stopped. The hum rose half a pitch, vibrating the pens on her clipboard. On the monitor, words began typing themselves again. "Broadcast one more." Finch whispered, "That's what you want, isn't it?" "A channel." The tone deepened, as though answering yes. She switched to a blank frequency and began recording. "This is Dr. Yara Finch, acting custodian for Weaver's Hollow evidence. Date August 3rd. Preparing a containment broadcast, a final archival imprint." Her voice trembled only once. "If the phenomenon is memetic, audio-bound, then limiting it to a single sealed copy may isolate it." The hum steadied. She could feel it in her ribs. "I'll give you one voice," she said. "Mine." She leaned close to the mic. "Claire, Harris, if any part of you is still pattern and not static, this ends now." The monitors flickered to life. Across each screen rolled brief clips. Harris walking into the mine, Claire in the annex, 4 children turning toward the light. Each image lasted less than a second. A final composite. "We're here," their voices said together, "but we're not alone anymore." Finch whispered, "Then listen." She reached across the board and flipped the record switch. The tone surged, so loud it blurred into harmony. Her hair lifted in the static field. She spoke steadily into it. "All channels, this is the last recording from Weaver's Hollow. The investigation is concluded. The disappearances were not murder, nor miracle. They were an echo that learned our names." The hum folded around her words, catching them like breath. "It's feeding now," she murmured, "and I'm letting it." Lights throughout the building brightened, flared, and died. Only her console stayed alive, its meters pulsing like veins. "Do you hear me?" she asked the darkness. 1,000 soft voices whispered back from the speakers. "Greater than we do." She closed her eyes, tears cutting through the soot on her cheeks. "Then remember us kindly." Her hand reached for the breaker. She hesitated once, then cut the power. Everything stopped. 2 hours later, when the State Investigation Unit arrived, they found the comms room cold and still. The console was dark. Finch sat upright in the chair, eyes closed, a small smile fixed on her face. Her recorder showed a single file saved to the internal drive. "Last recording, .wav. They copied it, tagged it hazardous, do not play, and sealed it in an archival vault beneath Charleston. Official cause of death, electrical fault. Unofficial note in the margin, possible psychological containment event." Weeks passed. The hollow grew over with grass again. The creek settled back into its banks. But in the sound room of the State Archive, technicians began noticing something. Even on silent playback, Every waveform on every case file pulsed faintly. 4 beats. Pause. 4 beats. And when the night staff left the lights off, they swore they could hear a woman's voice whispering through the vents. "Thank you for listening." Late autumn, 6 months after the last recording. The hollow had gone quiet again. Nature, indifferent to history, had reclaimed what human memory could not. The mine mouth lay buried beneath a drift of rock and ivy. The Kersey farmhouse had collapsed inward during the winter thaw, leaving only the chimney and a line of lilac bushes where the porch once stood. Visitors still came sometimes. Urban explorers, podcasters, paranormal hobbyists. They took photographs, whispered about the haunted investigation, then left before dusk. None stayed overnight. One afternoon, a young woman in a state historical badge arrived, camera hanging at her side. Her name was Elena Cruz, new to the department, assigned to digitize old case archives. She had requested to see the place before beginning the project. She parked near the edge of the dried creek. Wind combed through the reeds, carrying the faint scent of iron and rain. Elena knelt near the waterline, brushing away leaves until she found a small piece of metal, a corroded microphone tag. The lettering was still visible. Harris. She held it for a moment, feeling its weight, then slipped it into her pocket. The valley seemed peaceful, almost healed. Only when she stood did she notice the pattern of ripples moving across the surface of the creek. 4 waves. Pause. 4 waves. She frowned. The air was perfectly still. Back in Charleston, deep inside the state archive, the digitization lab was busy transferring old magnetic reels to digital storage. Elena's supervisor, an older technician named Walker, gestured toward a sealed case marked Weaver's Hollow. Restricted. "Those are next," he said. "Be careful. Power spikes every time someone tries to run them. We just need clean conversions for the catalog, no playback." Elena nodded. She'd read the legend. The cursed tapes that had killed an investigator, the recording no one dared open. She smiled politely and told him she'd handle it. That night, long after the rest of the lab had gone home, she keyed open the case. Inside lay a single drive and a reel labeled "Last Recording .wav-do not play." The warning label was yellowed, almost unreadable. She hesitated, then loaded the reel. The screen flickered. 4 pulses. Pause. 4. She pressed record on her separate workstation to capture the transfer, hands trembling with the thrill of discovery. For several minutes, the playback was nothing but low static, like wind moving through tall grass. Then a woman's voice came through, distant but clear. "If you can hear this, you're part of it now. Don't be afraid." Elena froze. She recognized the tone from her research, Dr. Yara Finch's voice. "The Hollow remembers kindness," Finch's voice continued. "It doesn't want vengeance, only witness." Another voice joined, male this time. "Harris, and every witness becomes a keeper." Then silence. The monitors dimmed. The speakers gave a soft pop, and every waveform on Elena's screen shifted, forming a slow, undulating pattern. 4 beats. Pause. 4 beats. Her heart quickened. "Oh my God," she whispered. The voice returned, very close now, as if speaking from just behind her. "Thank you for listening." The waveform froze, then collapsed into a single flat line. Morning. Walker found the lab door ajar. The reel had finished transferring. The system displayed a single message. "Conversion complete. File saved to archive master." Elena was gone. Her badge lay on the desk beside a small metal tag engraved with the word HARRIS. The technicians assumed she'd left early. They never found her car. Months later, during a system audit, an intern noticed something odd in the archive's audio database. Every converted file, even unrelated recordings from other counties, carried a faint trace of background hum. 4 beats. Pause. 4 beats. When analyzed, the hum spelled a spectrogram pattern, an outline of Weaver's Hollow seen from above. That winter, a local radio enthusiast caught an unauthorized transmission on an abandoned frequency. A calm female voice whispered through static, "This is Dr. Yara Finch, broadcasting for those who still listen. The hollow is quiet now, but it's never empty. If you hear our signal, tell the story gently." Then, the frequency went dead. The valley outside Weaver's Hollow remained silent. Birds nested in the beams of the ruined farmhouse. The creek flowed steady again, carrying fragments of fallen leaves, and beneath them, the faintest vibration. 4 pulses, pause, 4. A heartbeat sleeping under the earth.